Do you remember the Donkey Kong video game, in which a little Super Mario must climb to the top to bring down a monkey? Well, Latvian Pёtr Ugrumov must have thought something similar in the last week of the 1994 tour, where he went from being 9th overall, almost 15 minutes behind Miguel Indurain, to finishing 2nd on the podium in Paris, just 5.5 minutes behind the Spanish champion. Want to know how he did it? And learn about one of the greatest metamorphoses in the history of cycling? Well, without any further ado, let the show begin. Pёtr Ugrumov was no stranger to cycling fans in 1994. He was slow, like all Soviets of his time, to turn pro, and had to wait until David Hasselhoff sang his Looking for Freedom song in Berlin, before having his first successes in Western Europe. With notorious climbing abilities in the modest Spanish Sigur team, he was able to win the Vuelta a Asturias in 1991, when the top riders were then participating in it. And he was especially known for being the cyclist who came closest to beating Miguel Indurain in his triumphant biennium of 1992 and 1993, when he was less than a minute away from winning the Giro d'Italia in 1993. By then already in the ranks of Makir Balan, the team that had on its roster the doctor and the creator of monsters, Michele Ferrari. Ugramov was already 33 years old in 1994, but he knew that he could take on Big Mig in the Tour de France. His team, now renamed Gibus Balan, was putting on some real displays in that campaign, such as the well-known Magic Hat-Trick led by Moreno Argentine, winning the Flèche Wallonne, and even his young teammate Yevgeny Berzin had managed to beat Indurain and a budding Pantani in that season's Giro d'Italia. Ugramov's assault on the Tour was ready. However, things did not start well for our ex-Soviet friend. In the Bergerac time trial, Miguel Indurain put in one of his most Martian performances, and he crushed practically all of his rivals, including Ugramov, who despite finishing in the top 10, lost more than 6 minutes. The Pyrenean stages arrive and the Latvian rider still can't find his pedal stroke. Although in Hautacam he was amongst the best, after a new exhibition of the Benesto rider, overtaking the Carrera man Pantani. In the Luz Ardiden stage he suffered unspeakably, and he finished more than 5 minutes behind the leader in the rain. The cocktail that the Gibus riders were taking was not sitting well with Ugramov, who was not able to perform like the others. The rider himself said that it was an urgent visit to the dentist that prevented him from performing with the best that day, because as you know, anesthesia can have harmful effects if mixed with EPO. So, sunk in the overall, and again after failing to match Marco Pantani in the Alpe d'Huez stage, he decided to go all in, and even came close to risking his life in order to make his mark in that Tour de France. Ugramov sets his first objective the very next stage, a very hard alpine raid of 147 kilometers, with the Glandon, the Madeleine and Val Thorens at more than 2,340 meters. The very pass where Movistar made its wonderful tactic to finish 2nd and 3rd in the 2019 edition. After several attacks on the Madeleine, Ugramov himself breaks away with his teammate, the legendary Bjarne Riis, and ZG Nelson's little Colombian climber. Now, indeed, Ugramov was being a protagonist, and together with Riis, both worked to open a gap on the group of the strong riders, in which the Festina men of LeBlanc and Veronk did not seem to understand each other. What they did not know is that they were losing a podium that days later would go to Latvia. The leading trio crowned the pass with more than 1 minute of advantage over the group, in which Indurain himself was gaining ground on the weeping Veronk, and it would increase little by little until it reached 5 minutes in Val Thorens. Behind, Pantani, who had fallen at the start of the day, was turning into a beast, but it was too late. Riis had worked very well for Ugramov, and the Latvian, with a striking bald head full of wrinkles from the effort, was still in the lead, with of course Kakito glued to his wheel, without giving him a single turn on the front. The Gibus rider was so angry that he even stopped halfway up the climb to to see if the Colombian would pass in front of him and take some wind in his face, but even then he couldn't convince him. Logically, at the finish line, Rodriguez did decide to take over, but to attack and achieve an epic victory that drove Gianni Savio crazy at the finish line and further infuriated Ugramov, who was going to become a complete monster in the coming days, because the desire to take revenge on Caquito was greater than the more than 2.5 minutes that he took from Indurain on that day. So the next day we had a new great alpine stage, with the Col d'Assise, the Coiffre and the Colombier practically chained together, which presented a great opportunity to attack from afar. Ugramov had already become a beast by now, and despite the effort of the previous day, he decided to attack on the first ramps of the Coiffre, and soon caught up with the escaped Casputas. He was making a new exhibition, because despite Indurain's Banesto riders working in the bunch, Ugramov was already more than 2.5 minutes ahead of the peloton at the summit, even though he was only climbing with Casputas, and he was supposed to be tired because he'd been in the breakaway for more than 100 kilometers in the mountains. But it was on the Colombier where the real schemes were cracked. The Don decided to put it in the big ring and climb totally unchained, as if he were Diego Maradona surrounded by English colonialists of the Marianas, and he was already in the fight to be amongst the top 3 in the general classification of the tour. The power displayed was such that by the summit he had taken another minute from the group of favourites, where Marco Pantani, amongst others, had attacked. On the descent, Indurain saw the danger of the Latvian of the Givas team, and he cut the gap, but Ugramov entered the closest finish line as the winner, taking nearly 3 minutes off Indurain again, but the best was yet to come. Yet again, another day in the Alps the next day. A tremendous Chrono climb of almost 50 kilometers with 3 mountain passes, including Leget and Avoiraz. And there Ugramov decided to take out the pot of essences, because as the journalists of that time said, he was a great long distance rider. And so, after 2 days in a row in the breakaway, making real exhibitions in the mountains, the number 48, with that orthodox pedalling style, proved to be the cyclist in the best shape of the decade. And with more than 400 watts of power on that rainy day, he won again, putting in legendary time differences to his rivals. More than 1.5 minutes ahead of Pantani, and more than 3 minutes ahead of Indurain in his favourite discipline, although the Spaniard did not want to take risks on the descents because of the rain. But even with all the pap in the world, he could not have caught up with the monster Ugramov on that stage. In 3 days in the Alps, Ugramov had moved up to second place in the overall, 5 minutes and 39 seconds behind Indurain, possibly one of the greatest comebacks in cycling history. But it was not until the following year that we learnt the secret of this veteran cyclist. In 1995, the Italian police investigated Michele Ferrari and obtained documents showing the hematocrit level of his cyclists. This is the key to knowing if a body is producing red blood cells exogenously, as with EPO. From the documents, we found that Ugramov had a very low natural hematocrit level of just 33 points. The limit set by the UCI in 1997 of 50 points was shattered when Ugramov, at his most important moments of competition, raised his hematocrit level to 63.5 points, a rise of 30 points, in which he could have been doped with all kinds of substances to form this unreal elevation. Evidently, Ugramov disappeared from the top positions in 1997. But the most surprising thing is that the limit that the human body can withstand, according to experts, is 65 points. He was on the verge of dying. On the verge of dying for winning a Tour de France.